80,000 votes. 80,000 votes in 3 states. That's what cost Hillary Clinton the presidency back in 2016. That is what put Trump in the White House and forever changed the Republican Party and this country. 80,000 votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It's crazy when you think about it, isn't it? It's crazier still when you realize that Jill Stein won 130,000 votes in those same 3 states. Seriously. It's not an exaggeration to say that if Jill Stein hadn't run as a Green Party spoiler candidate, that Clinton would have won and this country would have been spared from Trumpism. Now, you think that Democrats and progressives would have learned their lesson back in 2016, but apparently not, because we seem to be careening towards a spoiler situation 2.0 this November. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the 70-year-old environmental lawyer and nephew of John F. Kennedy, the former president, is hovering around 12.5% in the polls. That's according to Real Clear Politics. Obviously, that is not enough to win the White House. It is enough, however, to swing an election. But to who, though? To Trump or to Biden? That is a question that everybody's asking. The polls really aren't very clear about this. Some show that he pulls more from Trump. Some show that he pulls more from Biden. But either way, the gloves are now off. Trump, who back in June was praising Kennedy as a good man and a common sense guy, is now calling him a radical left Democrat. I spoke to Ben Meiselas of the Midas Touch Network, and he said the following about this story. Watch. So, Ben, Robert Kennedy is not just a spoiler in the sense of a Jill Stein or maybe a Marianne Williamson. I mean, he actually is gaining some traction, and it's only a few thousand or a few 100,000 votes that separates a winner from a loser in this presidential election. He could certainly have an impact. What do you make of it?
Look, I don't think we should take that threat lightly in the pro-democracy community. I think he's a very weird dude. I think he's a very dangerous dude. I think when people actually hear what it is that he's saying, by and large, people become, repulsed by it. His own family doesn't support him. His views on the vaccine are, in my view, utterly reprehensible. I mean, I've always thought that the things that Donald Trump says is the depths of depravity, of absurdity, and that no one can come close. I still want to, I guess, keep that paradigm and framework, but I think that RFK comes pretty damn close to Donald Trump in kind of crazy world. But also, I think we got to take it seriously. Look, I'm not a poll guy, Don. I'm a stakes guy. And I think what we're seeing in the polls with the shift away from Donald Trump towards President Biden, and again, I really don't like polls. I think people are recognizing the stakes here. People are starting to zone in and recognize the importance of our democracy. I think in a two-party divided system and how polarizing that can feel, even though I think it's very different between what it used to be now with kind of the choice of pro-democracy versus MAGA. I certainly understand that there could be people who are just kind of flirting, if you will, with RFK. But I hope that flirtation, and I'm actually very confident that flirtation will quickly become puke when people actually start to realize what RFK actually says and what this guy's crazy worldviews are and beliefs are, and why his own family is freaking repulsed by him.
Well, listen, again, there's a lot out there about him and people who feel exactly the way that you do. I want to speak to him and talk to him about why he's doing it and some of the things that you talk about. He has been open to discussing them. But here's my question, though. If you'll just answer this for me, what do you, if you're looking at the polls, I know you said you're not a poll person, but who do you think he takes away from? Who is he the spoiler of? Is it more for Donald Trump or is it more for Joe Biden? Maybe you think it's the American people, but if you can keep it between Biden and Trump.
Look, I think you could potentially make the argument for both. I'm familiar with a lot of DeSantis supporters who, by the way, watch the Midas Touch Network, which was always a surprise to me. I'm like, y'all like the Midas Touch Network? They're like, yeah, you're normal. And in fact, that surprised me. And I did a great interview with a DeSantis supporter about how they left MAGA. But he's now an RFK guy, in his posts. And so I've seen some of that. We're not going to vote for Trump, but we'll vote for RFK. I don't see the polarization as much in the data. President Biden in all these primaries is hitting that 90%, 91%. But I guess the fear would be, do you have those, whether it's a Nikki Haley voter, a DeSantis voter, who would say, you know what, in a binary choice, I'm going to cast my vote for Biden. But now they're not giving Biden the addition. And so without the addition, it sort of functions as subtraction in the simple Trump v. Biden or Biden v. Trump kind of paradigm. So I think the data right now is a little bit all over the place. But I think that the rhetoric that RFK uses is certainly closer to Trumpian by far than anywhere near a Biden type rhetoric. I think Biden voters get that.
Yeah, and President Biden has been calling him dangerous lately. At first, he said, he wasn't so harsh when people asked him about RFK, and now he's saying he's just dangerous. Ben, thank you.
Good to be here as always.
Meanwhile, Politico has reported that the DNC and progressive organizations are also ramping up attacks on RFK. They're trolling him online. They're sending protesters to his campaign events. And this is why they're doing it, because Kennedy is saying stuff like this on television.
When people talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses, do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
Listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech.
President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. That's what RFK Jr. said live on TV. Was it a slip of the tongue? I don't think it was a slip of the tongue. I think he really meant it, because the anchor followed up on the question and he doubled down. So who do you think RFK Jr. will ultimately hurt more, Donald Trump or Joe Biden?